Hello, YouTube. All right, I fixed it. Okay, so today I want to talk about borderline personality disorder. If you are somebody who's been in a relationship or is currently in a relationship with somebody who has what I call toxic borderline personality disorder. Let me explain what that means. I use the word toxic when I'm referring to somebody who suffers from borderline personality disorder who is not in a state of recovery in their actions with other people. So if you have BPD and you're coming on to watch this, bear in mind this video and this channel is for non-BPDs who have been in very toxic relationships and need to recover. If you are a BPD and you've got your life together and you have great relationships with other people, this video is not about you. Please don't send me a comment telling me how I'm stigmatizing you. I'm not. If your life is going great, then congratulations. This is not for partners or relatives of borderlines who want to tell me how great their relationship with their borderline is. Great. I'm happy for you. This video is not for you. If you have been in a relationship with a borderline and it has been extremely damaging to you, this is to help you heal. So what was the title that I put on here? Title of the video was, what did I say? When loving a borderline is, let me take a look at it just to make sure. When loving a borderline is the worst thing for them and you, should you stay and help them? So when is loving a borderline the worst thing you can do for everybody concerned? And should you stay? Should you help? So those of you who've been watching this channel, obviously you know the answer to that question, but people come on and they're new. So for anybody that's new, here's what I recommend. To get the most out of this channel, put some time and effort into watching a lot of the videos, because at some point I'm going to address your concern. But also understand that if you've been in a relationship with a borderline, a toxic borderline, what is going to happen is you are going to become more and more emotionally and mentally isolated. And that is the design of the mental illness. The design of the mental illness is to make you think that your situation is extremely unique and different from everybody else's experience. And so while all those rules work for everybody else, but you don't understand, in our relationship, in my scenario, you don't understand. So it's really important to understand that that's part of it. That's what happens when you get involved with a borderline who's not in a state of recovery, who doesn't have the ability, assuming they're far on the spectrum and they don't currently have the ability to manage their symptoms, meaning their behavior, then you are going to feel more and more isolated, and you're going to feel more and more responsible, and you're going to feel like nobody can possibly understand what you're going through. And that's, the mental illness itself is designed to do that. Because if you thought and felt in a healthy fashion, if you thought and felt that you were part of the rest of the world, the rest of society, when these very strange behaviors and dynamics come up in the relationship, instead of moving towards them and having them pull you further and further away from other people, you would be going, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. I don't want to do this. This doesn't feel good. Instead of justifying being and doing things that are not normal and not fun and not empowering, not healthy. So to get right into it, I just want to get into some comments. So as I've said before, it's extremely important if you've gotten out of a toxic relationship with a borderline, you're going to have to do some work to get yourself back. Assuming you were, maybe you weren't. You might have been dysfunctional the whole time, but now you're really faced with the consequences of your own dysfunction for choosing that relationship. But assuming that there was a point in your life when you were happy when you were functioning, when you felt good about yourself, you had hope, self-esteem. In order to get back to that, you're going to have to do some work, because what happens very insidiously without your conscious awareness, sometimes in your conscious awareness you can't stop it, but you get involved with a borderline and your thinking gets flipped. So you start seeing everything upside down, which is what causes so much confusion and so much pain. And just because you're no longer in the relationship, that doesn't change. So it's like being on a canoe. You know, if your canoe flips over, if you sit there and just tread water and look at the canoe, it's not going to flip itself back. It's going to stay flipped over and it's going to sink. You're going to have to actually go under there and go under and push it up and flip it back over before you can get into it again, and then paddle down the river. So your mental and emotional state of being is going to be like that. You've been flipped, because if you stayed with a borderline, you have to flip everything upside down in order to make it work. And now you're no longer in the relationship and your boat is still flipped over and you're flailing trying to figure out, okay, I'm not in the relationship anymore. Why do I still feel so horrible? Well, it's because something needs to change. That's what the join button is all about, by the way. Click the join button and join as the super empath level, and you get access to the private subscription only videos where I tell you exactly what I did to completely 100%, not partially, completely 100% heal from the borderline effect of the relationship. I still have other stuff to do. I still have issues in life, don't get me wrong. But in terms of that relationship is not affecting me. It's not affecting my decisions or my life path or my sense of self-esteem like it was. All right, so let's get right into the comments here. Excuse me. Let's get right into the comments. Let me see. There's a couple I want to look at, but let me get to the first one here. The first one, which I thought was most important. So I understand that sometimes people don't hear right away, no matter how much I explain it or how many of my videos they watch. You know, the whole dynamic of the relationship, now I'm talking about both the borderline and the codependent, or the partner, or the empath, whichever word you want to use. The partner of a borderline and the borderline creates a dynamic. And in that dynamic is you end up with a really serious problem that tells you the problem doesn't exist. And so even though I state over and over and over again what's going on, and, you know, trying to help you wake up to realize that you've been seeing this thing completely mistakenly from the beginning, because that has to happen in order for the relationship to work. And again, I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about me, because I've been there. So this is, I know, because I was there. But sometimes you have to really hear it over and over again. And part of what my job to do is to address your unconscious denial. Unconscious meaning you're not aware of it. Consciously, you think you're listening to everything I say and you're in lockstep with everything I'm saying, but on an unconscious level, you're denying key things about yourself. So this individual, we've gone back and forth a few times. I have nothing against this individual. I'm not trying to make them look bad. What I am trying to do, and I hope this person watches, because I want to address the concern. So the main concern this person has is that they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave the relationship. By the way, just let me say, I do not recommend using anybody's name on here. I've never once used the name or the identity of my borderline ex. I don't recommend you do the same. I don't even recommend that you use a nickname of them. Don't do it. It's bad news. I don't have anything against borderlines. They have a mental illness. They're not, you know, they have no, there's no, we don't need to be pointing fingers at anybody. Let's see, hang on, what was that? So let's see. So he says, the first thing he says is, I'm trying to get away from her, but she makes it hard. So this tells me this is somebody who is not or has not been in therapy for a very long time because he thinks they have the power to make decisions for them. That's just not the case. You know, the thing about going no contact is you do it. You're out in the water, you're swimming, and a great white shark is coming at you. And he swims faster than you do. If you stay in the water, you're going to get eaten. So that would be like saying, yeah, there's a shark coming for me, and I'm trying to swim, but he's faster than me. He's making it hard. That's meaningless. You get out. You don't make excuses for why it's hard to not get out of the water fast enough for the shark to eat you. You get out. You do whatever the hell you got to do, and you get out. So when somebody says, I'm trying to get away from my borderline, no, that tells me that you're still enmeshed. And I get it. It was very hard for me to break away. Very hard. So I'm not minimizing it. But let's be real. You're the one having the problem, not her. She's not making you do anything. The truth is that if you weren't attached or interested, you would have no problem disconnecting. We all do it. So, you know, that tells me a lot right there. Let's see, what else? I want to get to the most important. So he says something here because he's relating to what I said in one of my videos. It says, BPD, can you just be friends with a borderline? Why borderlines love to, what did I say? Why borderlines love to something. I don't know what I said. He says here, talking about some things that I said, he says here, she was interacting with a fuzzy outline of me. So he may be repeating a story that I said. So I read something online which I found to be very helpful. It really helped me, you know, get over a lot of painful confusion about what I was going through. And if I remember correctly, it said something to the effect of, borderlines don't really see you. They see a fuzzy outline, human-shaped outline, that they project all of their internal experiences onto. So the negative things that they say to you, and you know, you did this, and you said that, and you're horrible, and you're mean, and you all that. That is the borderlines project more than anybody. I think I can say that safely. Cluster Bs. They project whatever comes out of their mouth is exactly what they are thinking and feeling. So when a borderline says you're a horrible person and you don't deserve love, they might as well replace the word you with I, because that's exactly what's happening. So you're this fuzzy outline and they project onto you. They don't see you. They really, no matter how long you've been with your borderline, they've never truly seen you, ever. So going further, so he says, she was interacting with a fuzzy outline of me that she projected all of her unconscious experiences and expectations onto. She was treating me as if I were a pure object and as if the situation we were in was a movie. So this was all things that I had said. So he's repeating things that I had said, obviously, because he relates. When I did not do, here's where I disagree with him. He says, when I did not do what she expected me to do, and I put my attention onto something other than her, if even for just a moment, she became offended, and then she was gone. I went off the script, so she was out the door. I'll never forget that. That's not accurate. That's what you've been trained to believe. You've been trained to believe that if you do what they want, that they actually know what they want from you. First, that's the first assumption. They train you to believe that they know what they want from you. And if you do what they want, they won't get angry. They won't get hurt. They won't get offended. So he's still operating from the incorrect assumption that there's something he can do to make it be okay. But he's not understanding the whole description of the fuzzy outline. The fuzzy outline means that it doesn't matter what you do. There is no script. That's the point. There is no script. They have no clue from one moment to the next how they're going to feel. The projection means that within them, they have all of this self-hatred, shame, and fear of abandonment. In fact, they're living abandonment. They were, in all, in all truth, they were abandoned. They were abandoned as an infant, and neglected, whatever it is that caused the trauma. There was some major experience of being neglected. So in order to have a plan, you have to have a sense of self. If you don't have a sense of self, there's no plan. Remember, think of an infant. Think of an infant in the crib. They don't have a plan. They don't know what's going on from one moment to the next. They only know how they're feeling in that moment and whatever impulse is flying through them. That's okay. It's not a judgment. That's just the nature of being an infant. They haven't developed anything to combat that. That's why they scream, cry, and laugh, and they don't have any control over anything that they do, and they have no way to deal with whatever impulses are flying through them. So they don't have a plan. The fuzzy outline means that because of the trauma that they survived, that erupts inside of them. The fear of abandonment, the self-hatred, the shame, I'm unworthy, all of these kinds of things, and you happen to be there. And it wouldn't matter what you were doing. You happen to be there, and as that comes out, it just instantly gets projected onto you. It has nothing to do with you not following the script. They think you did something I didn't want you to do. So they think that, and so they're going to train you to believe that it was something that you did. In my case, the last one was, I said a word. I literally said like 2 words. And those 2 words were what pushed her over the edge. Those words had nothing to do with it. She went on saying it was because you said this. When you said this, you meant that, and you were doing this, and you've been planning this all along. And of course, none of that is true. What was really going on is that she went through her fear of abandonment, her fear of being vulnerable, her fear of falling in love. All of those things popped up, and the defense mechanism was to grab whatever the hell you can to justify the defense, which is to blame and run away. So this tells me this person does not truly understand what borderline personality disorder is. And that's the case for all of us, because in order to make the relationship work, you can't see it for what it is. Because I guarantee you that when you see borderline personality for what it truly is, all of your illusions about what you think you want will vanish, and you'll go, oh, that's a waste of time. That can never work. It will literally be like if you're standing there next to this most beautiful, gorgeous woman, and then all of a sudden they turn into like something else that you have no attraction to, like a tree or a dog, you'll be like, oh, well, that's a beautiful dog, but I can't marry that. That's a beautiful tree, but I can't marry the tree. Whatever. These are bad examples, but the example is that when you see borderline personality for what it is, all of your delusions about what you think you're going to get from them and all that will disappear. That's why I keep hammering away that this is a mental illness, and do not listen to anybody, whoever they are, who says that borderline personality disorder is not a mental illness. Now, this is for you, the non-borderline. If you're a borderline, I don't care. You go find out whatever works for you. And if that doesn't work for you to call it a mental illness, you call it whatever you need to call it to recover. For those of us who have been with a borderline, if we look at you in any other way, we will be doing damage to ourselves and to you. Because as I say in the title here, when loving a borderline is the worst thing you can do. I don't have the title in front of me. It's the worst thing you can do. So this guy's going to go on and tell me why he needs to stay connected to them. I would like to say that, but I'm not going to. So I recommend that he gets therapy. I recommend that he goes to CODA like I do everybody. I'm not sure that he listens. I know most of you probably don't listen when I say that. You see, I think he's got some other. Yeah, so here he goes again. So this is his thing. His thing is, and your thing, if you're watching it, your thing is that you believe that your job is to do what other people tell you to do. This is a good codependent. You're looking for what other people expect of you so that you can be and do that. You've been programmed. Now, I don't know you. I'm quite certain, I'm not positive, but I feel quite certain that you grew up in a dysfunctional home where you were required to be something for somebody. You weren't allowed to have your feelings. You weren't allowed to be a unique individual. You had to be something for somebody. And so you spent a lot of your effort trying to find out what people wanted from you and to do that. That's why you picked a borderline. That's why we all pick borderlines. And how do I know that? Because you tell me. You say, you're trying to explain what she was like after explaining, one of her splits. And you say she was behaving as if she saw me as a robot who was programmed to do whatever she wanted to do. That's your projection. She wasn't behaving as though you were that. I guarantee you that's not what was going on. She was behaving like an infant who had an impulse. And she was behaving like somebody who has this internal script going on inside of her all the time, telling her how unlovable she is and how everybody's going to leave her. And the moment that you did, it wouldn't know. In fact, you don't have to do anything. When that feeling overwhelms her and you happen to be in her line of sight, she is going to say, you did this and you did that. Being the good codependent, you're going to go, I'm taking mental notes of what not to do so I don't do that next time. One guy came onto this channel a while back and asked me, what are some of the common triggers? And I asked, why are you asking that? That sounds like you have the assumption that if you can just avoid those triggers, then you won't have problems. And he said, yes, that's exactly it. I'm trying to find out what it is that triggers borderlines so that I can avoid doing that. And I said, there's nothing. You can't avoid it. The trigger has nothing to do with you. This is the illusion. It has nothing to do with you. It's going on within them. You just happened to be in the room when it happened. That's it. Wouldn't matter if you were being the best person in the world. Well, actually, truth is, if you're being the best person in the world, you are guaranteeing a split. You're less likely to have them split on you if you're a narcissist and you treat them like garbage. I'm not saying that, I don't find that funny or cute or anything like that. It's very sad. I'm just telling you the truth. Borderlines are going to be more attracted to somebody who cannot connect to them on an intimate level, meaning emotionally intimate. If you don't have any space to connect with them on an emotional level in an intimate way, they're going to be chasing after you because what they want is the intimacy. They think they want it. Once they get it, they hate it. But they think they want it. And as long as you don't give that to them, then it makes them chase after you. So that's why you find borderlines with narcissists. Now, the interesting thing is that the borderline will eventually, it may take years, but the borderline will eventually get the narcissist to be vulnerable. And the moment that they break down the narcissist's defenses to that degree where the narcissist becomes vulnerable, then they will split on the narcissist and destroy them as well. So they're really, if you think, I'm going to become a narcissist so that she'll stay with me, no, she'll find a way into your soft inner workings in the hopes of finding love. That's the thing. They're not evil. They're not looking at you like a vampire, like I'm going. They're trying to find love. They're broken. This is why it's a mental illness. If you can understand that, you'll go, wow, this is unworkable. Because if they were a vampire whose conscious desire was to find the soft, meaty underbelly so that they could feast on it, then it would be understandable. Then you could understand their motives. You can't understand a borderline because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't follow any rules. It's totally confusing. The truth is that when you feel that they honestly want your love, they're not lying to you. They're not master manipulators in that way. They are very manipulative. That's not what I mean. In that sense, they're not manipulating out of you this feeling of making you want to love them because they need you, and they're not lying about that. In that moment, they need you. But the nature of their mental illness is that once you turn around and love them, they can't help but react by splitting on you. They can't help it. If you understand that, you'll stop trying to fix it. But if you're still trying to fix it, it means you don't understand that yet. And a lot of times you don't understand it because you yourself aren't prepared to let go of it and look at your side. This is a dance. However screwed up they are, you're equally screwed up. It takes two to tango. And if you can't see that, then you're going to be in pain, you're going to be angry, you're going to be confused, you're going to keep falling for it, you're going to go from one borderline to a narcissist to a borderline, you're going to go back and forth. This is really important. You have to understand that they have a mental illness or you can't heal. In my experience, anyway. Let's see what else. Where else did he go? Okay, so we then had some back and forth about why you can't be friends with a borderline. And he had a problem with the apparent cruelty of simply dumping them like they don't exist. And I had to remind him, she dumped you, right? So this is a borderline who has dumped you and has damaged you and abused you, and you're now sitting here after you've been left with your in your hand. You're sitting there wondering how you can be loving and helpful to somebody who's just discarded you and abused you. I said, you don't see the irony in that? You don't see the codependence in that? So he came back again, and he said, wants to explain why. Here's why it's hard for me to just ignore her and go no contact. Let me be clear about what no contact means. No contact means not only do you, quote, ignore them, meaning you don't initiate any contact, but you also block your phone, your email, your Twitter, your Facebook. If necessary, you pick up and move. You get a restraining order. You continue not only as though you're never going to interact with them again, but you are going to prevent them from having any access to you. He doesn't like that. And in his mind, he thinks because he thinks it's cruel. But the truth of the matter is if you understand that borderlines, if they have sought you out and latched onto you, especially in a romantic sense, it's not coming from any place helpful or healthy. It's coming from their, for lack of a better word, their addiction. So that would be like saying to a drug addict who, is a meth addict or a heroin addict, it would be like you saying, yeah, but they really want the meth, and I don't want to not ever give them the meth. I mean, I want them to know I love them, and they need the meth, right? I mean, it's good for them. They like it. So, I mean, I'm not going to stop. Maybe I'll find a way to give it to them so it's not harmful. It's insanity. That's the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do for an addict is give them their drug of choice. If you are the borderline's romantic ex, you are their drug of choice. And you're not helping them. There's no way, you're not qualified to help them. The only person that can help them, number one, is themselves, combined with a qualified therapist. That's it. Those are the only people who can help them. You can't do that. You are keeping them, because what they have to do is be able to look at what's going on inside of them. As long as you're around, they won't be able to do that. They're going to keep reacting out of their mental illness. So it's incredibly selfish and narcissistic, once you know that, to keep trying to have access to them. Now, your denial is you think that you can just be friends with them. But the truth is, first off, if you were able to be just friends with them, meaning you didn't have any emotional desire for connection with them, then you would be able to see, oh, but that's bad for them. As much as I want to be their friend, I can't. If I love them, I have to separate because they can't see me, as a friend. It's not going to work out. So forgive me, Brian, I don't know you, but let's cut the bullshit here. You're in denial. You say you just want to be her friend, but the truth is, you love her and you want her to love you. You're setting yourself up, hopefully, to turn that, that friend scenario into a love scenario. You still love her. You think you do. You're also wrapped up in your own narcissism and your own projection. You don't realize that yet, but that's the other part of it. In a relationship with a borderline, both parties are wrapped up in their own narcissistic projection. On their end, they see you as the parent. They see you as the mother or the dad, and they will never see you as an adult, ever. They will always see you as the parent. And you see them as somebody who's same thing, that they're going to love you for who you are, that they're going to meet your deepest needs, that they're going to see you on the deepest level and love you on the deepest level. And that is your projection. That's what you want for yourself, which is why you work so hard to understand them and love them, because that's what you want for yourself. You don't know that right now. You honestly think that you have unconditional love and you just want to love them. But the truth is, if you really just loved them, you would see it is impossible to help them. And the kindest thing you can do is put them in a scenario where they'll be most motivated to seek out their own help. So he says, here's why it's hard for me to just ignore her and go no contact. She had a horrific childhood, was a ward of the state. And this is, again, these are all just details. This is what I mean when I said in the beginning that when you're in the denial phase of it, you want to say, yeah, but you don't understand. It's complicated. You don't understand. With us, with me, and people want to talk to me. One of the ways that I know that somebody really needs help with a therapist is if they say, here's my email. I need to talk to you more about this, but I don't want to do it on here. Is there any way I can talk to you on the phone? That's great. If I were a therapist, that would be great. I'd have a great practice because then I'd be able to do that. But I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified to do that. But the truth is that the majority of people that ask to connect with me, if I said, oh, sure, and it costs $100 an hour, they would say, oh, well, never mind. I thought we were just friends, like two friends sitting around having a beer talking about it. I understand the feeling. What it means is that when you hear me talk, you feel like you finally found the one person who can understand you. And that feeling of isolation that I talked about earlier, that you're so isolated, and you finally make a connection, for the first time. I may be somebody that you feel a connection with that you haven't felt in years or months. I get that. But that's your projection. That shows how isolated you are. The truth is that you're not alone, which is what CODA is all about, coda.org, CODA.org. It's a self-help group where you talk to other people who feel exactly the same way that you do. You're no longer alone. So the illusion that there's very few people who can truly understand what I'm going through is not true. Now, it is true that a lot of people who haven't been with a borderline aren't going to understand at all. But there's no shortage of people who've been in all kinds of dysfunctional relationships who know exactly how you feel and what's going on with you. So he gives me all these things about why it's so different and why he can't just ignore her. And he feels so bad for her because of her terrible childhood, the abuse she suffered. The fact that that was done to her was not her fault. I feel awful for her. It's pitiful. And yet, she rejected you. Do you not see that? She rejected you. As far as I know, right here, she still is in a state of having rejected you. She might, if you wait long enough, she might hoover you back. But, as of right now, as far as I know, she rejected you. And you're feeling awful for her. The abuse that she suffered. What about the abuse that you suffered? What about all the times that she split on you, blamed you, attacked you, ghosted you, ran away? Are you telling me that those don't matter? Why is it that it's okay for her to abuse you? And it's okay for her to need you, but it's not okay for you to need her. Who's taking care of you? Who's the one that's going to you and saying, Brian, that's so awful. Come here, let me love you. I'm sorry she can't love you. I'll love you. Why are you chasing after somebody that can't love you? You say, it's hard for me to just ignore her and go no contact. So it means you don't understand, and I'm not blaming you. It means you don't understand what's going on here. You don't understand her mental illness, number one, and number two, you don't understand your own codependence. So if you've been with a borderline for, more than two, I'll give you 2 splits. The truth is, the moment you meet them, I mean, if you've been with them for more, than a day, you're a codependent, period, end of story. But if you don't want to buy into that, let's give it 2 splits. First time somebody splits on you, okay, everybody can have a bad day, right? Everybody can make a mistake. Second time they split on you and it's still just really outrageous and it doesn't make any sense and you didn't deserve that. If that doesn't wake you up to go, wow, what the hell am I doing here? You're a codependent. The definition of a codependent, don't get wrapped up on the word dependent. Don't get, your panties in a bunch and defend yourself about how you're not dependent on anybody. That's not what that means. The term is a term that applies to the dynamic of the relationship. In order to be with a borderline, as you say, who's had a terrible childhood, suffered tremendous abuse, it wasn't her fault. In order to be with that person, you have to take your normal requirements in a healthy relationship and throw them out the window and put up with a lot more responsibility and get a lot less from it. It means that it's lopsided. You have to get into a lopsided relationship in order for it to last. That's called dysfunction. You have to get into a dysfunctional dynamic in order for that to work. You justify that by telling yourself how much you're doing it for them, how much you love them. But the truth is, you don't even see who she is. So the irony here is that, and I'm pointing you out because we've all done it, myself included. The irony is that when we're in the middle of it, we don't see, we get so wrapped up in the confusion, we don't see any of that. We get so wrapped up in our projection of how much we love them. And if only they would let us love them. If they would just let us in, I know that I could heal it. I know that I could turn it around. If she would just let me, if she would stop fighting and just let me love her, I know that my love would get in there and heal her finally. And for the first time in her life, she'd experience true love and she would heal. And that is your projection. That means that's what you want for yourself. And it's so painful. The thought of you seeing that in yourself is so tremendously painful that the only way you can survive is by projecting it onto somebody else. Now, the only person qualified to take on that projection and keep that projection going for you is a cluster B, specifically a borderline. And the borderline, the mental illness they have is absolutely brilliant. Not them. It's absolutely brilliant because the difference between a borderline and, say, a sociopathic narcissist is that a sociopathic narcissist doesn't have the vulnerability to reach out and say how much they need you and they love you and mean it. They may say it, but they see you as an object that they're going to devour. The NXIVM cult thing, if you watch any of that and you find out the Keith Raniere guy, he's a perfect example. At no point did that guy ever show any true vulnerability. Everybody was something for him to use, abuse, and discard. The borderline, when they want you, they really mean it. When they love you, they really mean it. When they make you promises about how they're going to take care of you and do this for you and that for you, they really mean it. And you are sensitive enough because of your empathic abilities as the codependent. You are sensitive enough to know that they mean it. But because you don't understand that they have a mental illness, you can't put two and two together, which says that they mean it now, but in 10 seconds, it's not going to mean anything. Or tomorrow, they're going to forget everything that they said because they have a mental illness. Because your projection is to finally be loved and seen for who you truly are. Because that is your projection, you project that onto them. Because if it were you who was looking up with big, bright, shiny puppy dog eyes, like they do, if it was you looking up at somebody saying, I promise I'm going to be there for you and I'm going to love you and we're going to be the best, you would follow through. You would remember the next day and you would follow through. And if they did something hurtful, you wouldn't turn around and yell and scream at them. You would acknowledge and go, yeah, but I love them, so it's okay that they just made that mistake, and you would keep going. That is your projection that that's what's happening to them in that moment. And that's the insidious part of it. Because if you could tell it was a con job, you would walk away. Which is why for some people, there's a lot of people probably like me, where I can see the narcissist coming. I'm not, the idea of being with an NPD is, it's never happened, it's never gonna happen. A BPD, because of their vulnerability, I can project my own childhood feelings of abandonment and abuse and lack of understanding, and if only somebody had loved me, right? That's what's going on. Whenever you look at the borderline or think like this guy, let's put into perspective here. He writes all these stories I'm not going to get into about all the horrible things that she did to him, how she abused him, how she split on him, how she, all the things that she did. And I'm with you 100%. I get it. Yeah, you qualify. But then his response is then to talk about how hard it is to ignore. Now, bear in mind, to say that, if you were to say it's really hard for me to just ignore her, that would be like if you were talking about a puppy that's sitting there looking up at you and following you everywhere you go, that needs love and needs to be fed and needs to be taken care of, and you're just abandoning the poor helpless puppy. That's not what happened. This is a human being who has said, go away, leave me alone, I want nothing to do with you. And you're sitting here ironically going, but I can't just abandon them, they need me. Can't see how bonkers you are. And that's because, forgive me for calling you bonkers, we all have it. That is because you don't see your narcissism in projecting onto the borderline that everything that you want to give them is what you want somebody to give to you. So again, how this works is we replay the dynamics of our childhood. Sometimes we even dramatize it even further so that we can relive the feelings that happened to us, and this time we're trying to fix it. The borderline's doing the same thing, by the way. They're doing the exact same thing. So, but the borderline is trying to talk you into being them. This is the mental illness part. You're sitting there being loving and kind and following through, and what happens is then out of nowhere they start telling you how you abandoned them and hurt them and all that, and none of that happened. So that's the mental illness part. There's like zero reality to what they're projecting onto you. So you don't have that exact same thing if you're codependent. But what you want to do is you want to relive the experience of being emotionally neglected, abandoned, abused, devalued, whatever it was. And if it's a really intense, unresolved need, you will seek out somebody who's going to really bring that feeling up. And there's nothing worse than the push me, pull you. On the one hand, so it's not like the borderlines throw out a hint. Not like they're going to throw out a hint of love and you're chasing after the hint of love. They finally give you all of the attention you think that you want and deserve. And they go to that desire, and it gets totally, on a superficial level, it gets totally met, and then they pull it away. I mean, it's just horrifically torturous for a starving person. You're a starving person. If you're with a borderline, emotionally you are starved. You are starving. And somebody comes along with your favorite food. Think of whatever the hell it is, fried chicken or, sushi, or I don't know, if you're a vegan, who knows, whatever. Vegetable, whatever. And it comes by and they put it under your nose. And they put the plate down in front of you and they give you a spoon and a knife and you get a couple of mouthfuls in and then they take it away from you. They throw it in the trash right in front of you. That's what the borderline does. Borderline doesn't hint at something. They give it to you and then take it away from you. So that means that that's what you experienced as a kid. May not have been in the same way. They didn't act or talk in the same way. Your experience was the same. That love was offered to you and then it was taken away. What my dad used to do is, of course he was an alcoholic. He'd get drunk and then he would sit me down like he wanted to talk to me. And then he would smile and he would ask me questions like he wanted to hear what was going on in my life, thinking, oh, my dad's going to praise me and tell me how great I am. And he would wait until I was at my most vulnerable, after I'd shared whatever it is I did in school or whatever. And then he would turn around and compare himself to me and tell me why, when he was my age, how he had accomplished so much more than me and blah, blah, blah. And I fell for it every time because as a little kid, what I want most is I want dad's approval. And every time I fell for it. So no wonder I sought out borderlines. And that was just my dad. All right? So you don't understand if that's what you want. If you think you have to stay with them and it's your job to take care of them, first off, you don't understand the mental illness that they have, that it is impossible for them to accept any love that you give them. Even if you're their friend. If you're a romantic ex, you can never go back to nothing again. It's never going to happen. They will pull you in and they will get you to feel safe and they'll try to turn it into a love relationship and then they'll split on you. There's no way around it. And it's not helpful to them for you to keep being that for them because they don't ever have the need to go get help. If everybody that the borderline interacted with when they split on them, whether that's romantic or friendship or otherwise, if everybody responded out of a healthy place and wasn't responding out of the need to take care of them, if everybody, when they split on them, said, you know what, that's really painful and I don't deserve that and I can't have you in my life. If everybody did that, they would be aware that if I want people in my life, I'm going to have to go look at this borderline personality disorder thing. So there's just no way that you're helping them. And the second one is that you don't see for yourself how damaging, how incredibly damaging. Let me read another comment because this points out the damage that we go through. So as I've said before, just because you're not in the relationship with the borderline doesn't mean you're going to flip that canoe over and start getting better. You might get a little bit better. There might be some improvement. But there's a very good chance also that there's this, what's the word I want to use? It's like an infection that gets in there and infects you on the deepest level. And it infects you so intensely that just because you're no longer bedridden, you're still going to need antibiotics. Otherwise, that infection could take over and kill you. There are people that have been out of relationships with borderlines for years or decades, and they still feel devalued. They still feel that emptiness. They still think about them. All right, so here's another one again. If you're watching this, again, this isn't a personal attack. I'm showing for everybody. If you make a comment on my channel, everybody can see it anyway. So let's discuss it. Let's take a look at it. So this person says, I just got through the 7th month of being out of my relationship. I have recovered a lot, but can't seem to always wonder if I was to blame in some way. So let's think about this again. You know you loved them. You know you gave to them. You know that. And you know that they kept rejecting you over and over and over again. You also know that. So why is it that you keep thinking, was there something that I did? The guilt. I remember feeling that. And it made me feel so crazy. Because I remember having been, after the first, it was one of the early on when the devaluations and the splitting started to happen. And after having the most incredibly deep connecting phone call I get a phone call or an email the next day saying, I can't be with you. I had a bad dream and, there's just, you're bad for me and I can't be with you. And it's like, wow, what just happened? What about all that talk about we're going to work through this and we're going to work through that? Where did all that go? And so I said, okay. And I didn't respond. And during that period of, she broke up with me, there's this period before she hoovered me back in of me feeling really guilty. Like, God, I really should call her. Oh, I can't. She doesn't want me to. But God, I really wish that, and then you go through this craziness of, on the one hand, feeling responsible. And at the same time, the conscious awareness that you've been discarded. And it's very, very challenging. Well, it's because on an unconscious level, they're setting you up. They don't mean to. This is how the borderline disease, mental illness works. They consciously are not choosing to do this. This is what's happening on an unconscious level. On an unconscious level, what is happening is that when they run away, they feel like when they reject you, they're rejecting you out of a feeling that you've already rejected them. So that's where your guilt comes from. Your guilt comes from that unconscious inducement. They are inducing guilt in you. Even though, that's why on a conscious level, it doesn't make any sense, but unconsciously you're feeling all this guilt. So this is the infection. They bite you when they're like a cobra when they split, they bite you, the venom goes in, you're now infected. You're now infected with borderline personality disorder. You're not a borderline, but you're infected with it. 7 months after having been discarded, probably, I'm sure, you're going around feeling guilty, like you did something wrong. If I had only done things differently. That's what the other guy was saying. He thinks that what she's doing is that she has a script and he didn't follow the script and therefore he's a bad person. And the truth is, there's no script. Do you remember that? Can you go back and I can remember that. I can remember that there were times that I did one thing and that was bad. But earlier on, that thing was really good. So you're trying to find what you're supposed to do and what not to do, but the rules change from one day to the next. On one day, you're supposed to do that thing, and then the next day, that was the worst possible thing you could have done. But they still think that. If you could just do that one thing, it would all be okay. If you could just figure that out, it would all be okay. Then he goes on to say, the damage done has been extreme and so confusing. I will never truly understand her nor the evilness she has laid upon me. And, I understand that. But that, in the beginning, it's helpful to judge them that way. In the very beginning, it's helpful to see them as evil people. Because that means that you separate. Because as long as you see them as being innocent and pure, you won't be able to walk away. But if you see them as being evil, and they've done it to you, in the beginning it helps because it creates separation. But then you have to learn to forgive. And then you have to take a look at your side of it and see that they actually they're not trying to do anything. They're not evil at all. They're as much, and I mean this, they are as much a victim, if not more, of their own mental illness than you are. They wish, I promise you, they wish. If they could snap their fingers and make it stop, they would. They can't. So they're not evil. They're mentally ill. But it has the same effect. It might as well have been done by an evil person because the effect is exactly the same as if they were the most evil person in the world. And that's the sad part. That's why borderlines in the beginning think that I'm stigmatizing them because their behavior is extremely, intolerably, horrifically abusive and destructive. And yet they consciously aren't trying to do that. It's not their fault. But it's also not their fault that you choose to keep staying with them after they keep hurting you. He says, how do I just put her in my past like other people that didn't work out? You don't. You need help. So on the bottom, I gave him the 3 steps, which I teach if you click join. Go to therapy, go to coda.org and do daily meditation. Otherwise, you will not recover. You might not recover. So therapy, Coda, daily meditation. So the answer to the question is how can I just let it go? You can't. You've been infected. You've got an infection. You got to deal with the infection. Those are the 3 ways to do it. And the feeling that you lost your soulmate, that's very understandable, except for the fact that that was not your soulmate. How do I know that? Because you never know a borderline. You've never seen who that person really was. You've never seen them. You think you have, but what you've seen has been facades. They're not real. And that's why they drop one facade and go into the next, like they can drop people and go from one to the next. It's because you haven't really seen them. They also have never really seen you. Your relationship is a cross projection. Their fantasy projection, they project onto you when they're love bombing you. You fantasize and project onto them throughout the whole thing. It's a fantasy projection. You never saw them either, and they never saw you. So and this is what happens when you find, most often when you meet somebody, and in that first hour, they're like, oh my God, you're that soulmate, that person I've been waiting for my whole life. I've known you forever. That feeling of knowing somebody forever, that is a sure sign you're projecting onto them. Because the feeling of knowing them forever means that you're seeing yourself in them. And of course you know yourself. And so you're seeing that in them. And that's where the feeling comes from. Now they're doing the same to you. Now that's okay. This happens in healthy relationships also. But the difference is, in a healthy relationship, somewhere around 9 months to a year, the projections start to fade and you actually do start to see them for who they are. And then the relationship will shift. And if you really are able to see them and love them, then the love blossoms in a whole different way. And then maybe they are your soulmate. But the first 6 to 9 months, it's always projection. With a borderline, it never gets past the projection, ever, on both sides. All right, so was there any other questions I wanted to look at on here, or any other comments, I mean? Yeah, but I'm not going to. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I don't see any questions here. Do I see one question? I'm refreshing the page here. Currently 22 viewers. Kazumi says, does this apply for any spectrum of BPD? I don't understand your question. How about the high functioning ones who are able to realize their dysregulation? That's an assumption. What makes you think that the high functioning ones are able to realize their dysregulation? Where did you get that idea? The high functioning ones are the most dangerous, because high functioning meaning that they're extremely intelligent and perceptive, which means that the facades that they create are much more sophisticated. The one that I was with was incredibly high functioning. She was incredibly intuitive, extremely smart, very intuitive, to the point where she could pull out in me feelings on the deepest unconscious level more brilliantly than the most brilliant psychiatrist. And she was also very able to talk about her own feelings in a very seemingly conscious way, why she did this and why she felt that, and that gives you the feeling that, oh, they won't do it now. So you're projecting. their level of high functionality has no bearing on their ability to, quote, realize. Because realization means it has to be followed through with action. So just because they can look you in the face and apologize and tell you, I did this and I did that and I'm so sorry and you didn't deserve that, and the reason I did that is because this and I feel this way, and they're seemingly taking full responsibility. In fact, the girl I was with, when I first met her, she said, what I'm really into is communication, which really got my attention. What I really want is to communicate and learn how to communicate on the deepest level. And, no matter what anybody says, there's nothing anybody that can say or do that should stop us from talking through things. When ironically, all it took was for me to say 2 words, and that was it. You said those 2 words and I can never see you again. So that level of high functioning doesn't have any bearing on their ability to not split. Again, it's a mental illness. You're trying to look at them as rational, educated people. Well, they're rational and educated, and so therefore they must know what's going on, which means that they're going to follow through on what they say. Doesn't mean that at all. That's why it's a mental illness. That's why most people think that they're these evil geniuses, because when they're rational and high functioning and communicating their feelings and your feelings, and you think you're dealing with a mature, healthy person. And you can sense that they mean everything that's coming out of their mouth. And then the next day they split on you. So again, I don't know where you're coming up with this idea that, the high functioning ones have a greater ability for self-regulation, because they don't. Let's see, what else? Kadash Chaya says, what do you do if you have children with a borderline? That's a really great question. I strongly recommend that you get a therapist and a lawyer now. Because this is really important. If it was just you and the borderline, then you have to go no contact. And you can do that if it's just you and the borderline. But having kids, that makes it very difficult. But listen, there's no way those kids are going to escape having a parent as a borderline without severe damage, if not becoming borderlines themselves. So you need to seriously look into getting sole custody. Now, I don't know the legality of that. And I also don't know, can somebody, co-parent with a borderline and keep their kids safe? The kids are now the most important thing. So that's my recommendation to you. Get a qualified psychologist and a lawyer. And then go as far no contact as you can and do everything in your power to see if you can rectify any damage that's been done. Because look, this is your responsibility. You chose to have kids with a borderline. I mean, children is plural. So you didn't just have one, you had more than one. And there's no doubt in my mind that you saw that something wasn't right even before you chose to have a child. There's a big load of karma on your back for making this choice more than once. So if you want to fix it, you've got to do whatever is necessary to help those kids. Again, I'm not a therapist and I'm not a legal expert. So go talk to those two and then figure out what your rights are and what you can do, and work with your therapist to find out what is the most beneficial thing you can do for those children, and do it yesterday. What else? Michael Atwell. So is that a question? Let me see. My fiance has, if you have a question, write the word question, please. My fiance has BPD and is very empathetic. But do borderlines also usually have a narcissistic traits as well? So my friend, you need to do more research into borderline personality disorder. I don't know what you mean by empathetic. Empathic can mean a bunch of things. So if you mean by empathetic that she cares deeply for you, that's great. Problem is that if she's a borderline, that spirit of emptiness doesn't, I mean, that spirit of emptiness, Freudian slip, that period of empathy does not last long. And the empathy is superficial, because true empathy goes into the other person and stays there, and you understand what it's like to be that person. And so when your feelings change, your behavior doesn't. The borderline, their behavior changes. So it's not true empathy. They're very psychic almost. They're very intuitive. That's different. Intuitive means that they can guess your feelings most of the time. They think they're psychic. And for all intents and purposes, they might as well be psychic. But the truth is that they're just extremely, extremely, extremely good at figuring out what your thoughts and feelings are some of the time. When they're splitting on you, they can't tell the difference. And of course, they think you're thinking and doing something that's absolutely false. That's not empathy either. So I don't think you truly understand what borderline personality disorder is. You say your fiance, so you're with your fiance. Why? I mean, this person has borderline personality disorder and you're going to marry them? Why? Why are you signing up for that? You ask, but do borderlines also usually have narcissistic traits as well? Borderline personality disorder is a form of narcissism. It is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. Another way to look at it is called vulnerable narcissism. You don't have a clear understanding of what you're dealing with. Now, I don't know if your fiance is in therapy, but my understanding is that it takes a minimum of 8 to 10 years of solo therapy with a qualified psychologist, and the borderline has to be very, very, very committed to seeing their borderline issues and taking full responsibility. After 8 to 10 years, then maybe, if you're lucky, they'll be able to take actions that aren't destructive even when inside they're splitting on you. You're going to marry somebody who has this mental illness? This is nothing against them. I don't know them. I have nothing but compassion for borderlines. If there was anything, if the universe said, we'll give you one thing that you can fix in the universe, I would get rid of BPD. Because it's horrible what they go through. Absolutely horrible. I want them to have love, as much as anybody. Anybody deserves it. I don't understand what you're doing, wanting to marry one. So yeah, that's a question for you. Is she in therapy? What is it you think you're going to gain from this? Do you believe that the relationship is going to get better? Because let me explain to you what happens when you're with a borderline. What happens when you're with a borderline is that they, like you, are seeking to connect on the deepest level. They want love more than anything. And when you first connect with them, it's the best love you've ever felt. Actually, in hindsight, if you recover and you go and look back, you'll realize that it was all projection and it was very superficial. But as far as you know, that was the most intense, beautiful love you've ever experienced, and that's who you want to marry. I remember telling my borderline that, the person I was with for the 2 weeks, that's who I want to be with. I don't know who this person is. She didn't like that at all. But it's true. The really hurtful person who doesn't know who I am, who says all these horrible things and does the absolute most destructive behavior I've ever experienced in my entire life. Why would I want to be with that person? So if you're with somebody who has borderline personality disorder, that means that they split on you. It means they love you one moment and they hate you the next. So if that's not what's happening, then she doesn't have BPD. You say she has BPD, so what the hell are you doing? Yeah, she's very empathetic when it serves her mental illness, but when she splits, as you say, you're kind of tiptoeing around. She's incredibly narcissistic and has no empathy. She's incredibly destructive. When the borderline devalues you, so it's different than somebody that, say, just gets bored with you. It's different from somebody who just decides that they're not really that into you or that the love has faded. That's a painful, horrible place to be, but that's different. That's not what borderlines do. Borderlines, not only do they hate you, when they dislike you, but they find ways to devalue you. Again, that's their mental illness. That's because they are in a constant state of feeling devalued themselves, and they project that onto you. So if you're with a borderline, you're with an infant. Somebody who mentally and emotionally is at the state of infancy. Your fiance became borderline, if they truly are borderline, because when they were an infant, there was some trauma that affected them so deeply that something broke upstairs. And so they're constantly in this duality of wanting to connect with a parent and then feeling completely worthless and unlovable. That's what you get when they devalue you. The devaluation inside of them is so horrible. It is the worst thing you can possibly imagine. And that is what is going to be thrust upon you. The longer that you are with them, what is going to happen is you are going to want to get closer to them. And you will. They want you to get closer to them. So when they're hoovering you, or when they're in their idealization phase where they're idolizing you and treating you like a king, they're setting you up. The rubber band is going back, or the mental illness is setting you up, because once they really feel the love from you and it really gets in there, then comes the terror of being abandoned. That terror of being abandoned is instantly followed by feelings of devaluation. They're not worthy, they're unlovable, which they then immediately project onto you. So if you're marrying a borderline, it's got to be because you think it's going to go somewhere. You think it's going to get better. You think you're dealing with somebody who has emotional issues, and maybe if I hold her hand, it'll get better. But you don't understand the mental illness. The mental illness will make her devalue you more and more each time. Each time she splits on you and devalues you, you will then try and figure out how you can be a better husband. And you will learn ways to love her more deeply and more compassionately, which she will like for a second. Then it will go deeper. The emotional connection will go deeper, which will make her split and devalue you even worse. You are digging a hole. It will only get worse unless she's been in therapy for 8 to 10 years. I have a hard time believing, Michael, that you're with a borderline who's been in therapy for 8 to 10 years. Because if you did, she would have already explained all of this to you. And you'd know that borderlines are narcissists. When they love you, it is narcissism. So you think narcissism is only when they're mean to you. Because that's obvious. They have no empathy. They're treating you poorly. They're acting in ways that obviously aren't you. You didn't do that. You didn't deserve that. That's obviously their narcissism. But their narcissism is in full play when they are love bombing you. When, like my borderline ex, when she would put on, the apron and cook me, a 3-course meal in, a bikini, and then give me a foot massage, and then have the best sex of my life, and then the next day tell me why I'm the worst person that ever existed. She's narcissistic throughout the whole thing. You think that there's two people. You think there's one that's really loving, and then there's a narcissist. But they don't have any empathy when they're showing you empathy. The empathy that you're experiencing is not empathy. It's narcissistic projection. So they have borderline traits, they have narcissistic traits as well all the time. You've been benefiting. This is your narcissism. When they're idealizing you, you benefit from it. It feels good. But you don't realize that you're not seeing them for who they truly are. And let me ask you this question. I'm not you, so I can't put myself in your shoes. I know what happened with me, and with every, borderline that I've talked to, and every, survivor of borderline, they'll say the same thing. After the fact, when you look back in hindsight on the relationship, the love bombing was very superficial, and she wasn't seeing you then either. Because when they're love bombing you, yeah, there's all kinds of really good feelings, but there's also this feeling of like eating cotton candy. Like, yeah, it's really tasty and sweet, but it feels like there's just nothing there. I'm sinking my teeth into it, but there's nothing to chew on. Something's missing. Even when you're getting love bombed, there's still some anxiety and this feeling of, I hope I don't fuck it up. How long can I keep her in this state? That's not real love. Again, I don't know you. I don't know her. But, you're on here. Obviously, you're experiencing the negative sides of her narcissism. I would think very strongly before making that commitment. But it's your life. You're free to do whatever you want. That's my unqualified opinion based on my experience. You can do whatever you like. Anita Sodders, does she think sometimes of me? We have no contact since 2 months after a relationship of 11 years. I completely understand that feeling. I remember having that feeling of, what is she thinking about me? Still driving me crazy. What is she thinking about me? Who cares? What difference does it make? What is important is not what she thinks, but what she does. Whether she, like I was saying to Michael there, whether she thinks positively or negatively of you is completely, superficial narcissism, and there's nothing about it that's helpful for you. The end result, whether she loves you or hates you, is that you're desperately alone. So who gives a shit what she thinks? I'm pretty sure that if you have had no contact for 2 months, she vacillates between hating you and loving you. Now, at some point, when a borderline has done the final devaluation, which Michael Atwell, your fiance, if she is a borderline and doesn't get help, there will come a final devaluation where she will not hoover you back. And that will be after you have given absolutely everything that you have. When there's no more intimacy left in you, you are sucked dry from anything, and there's nothing more that she can gain from you. She will devalue you and discard you completely. And if you're married, that means your bank account, your reputation, if you have kids, your kids, those things are going to be weapons that she's going to use to demolish you. This is what you're signing up for. Michael, do you have a therapist? Because you need to be talking to a therapist about this before marrying a borderline. And anyway, so Anita, who cares? This means that you're still, think of it, the craziness, you're still attached to somebody who was so destructive to you. I mean, I'm reading the other things. She was really hurtful to you. And you're worried about what she thinks? Why aren't you thinking about what she did? What she did is more important than what she thinks. Borderlines, it's not what they think, it's what they do. The normal, if there is such a person, a healthy person, what they understand is what they do. Their actions are what's most consistent. And they're able to align, if they do have positive feelings, they're able to commit to those feelings and align their actions to them. Borderlines don't do that. Okay? So both Michael and Anita, that's what the join button is all about. Click the join button and then watch those members only videos, because I tell you how I completely healed myself. If you don't want to subscribe, Start with this. First things you got to do is you got to go to therapy. You got to do all three. In my experience, you got to do all three. This one is absolutely free. Coda.org. 3. Daily meditation. If somebody said, I can only do one of those things, I would say Coda, without a doubt. And that's the one that people, are least inclined to do, because it's really working those 12 steps and looking at your part of it is challenging. If you don't want to take a look at yourself, then it's going to be very hard to recover. And for anybody listening, I say this with as much love as possible. I have empathy for you, but I have no sympathy for you if you're not willing to look at those 3 things. Number 1, therapy. I can't afford it. There's no therapists around here. I know for a fact that if you put the effort into it, you can find online therapy and free. I know for a fact, because I don't have the link. I should have it, but I found a link. You can do it. So please don't give me that excuse. Coda.org. You can go there now. You can go to a Zoom meeting. You can get a sponsor. You can talk to other people and get friends. And it's free help. And it's the most effective way to heal. So you're not willing to do that, I have zero sympathy for you. And then daily meditation. You do all 3 of those things, you can heal completely. And you never have to ask the question ever again, what is she thinking of me? Or, why do I have to discard them forever? Why can't I still be friends with them? Is it possible to just, just be friends and just sort of have sex on the side and still, is it still possible to do that? And why is it that no matter how many times they hurt me, I still can't get them out of my head? Well, you're infected, my friend. You're infected with a horrific disease called codependence. You need help. And you can't do anything for them. Anything that you try to do for them, you can't help them. Because you have an agenda. The only person that can help them is somebody who doesn't have an agenda, and that person is a therapist. You are going to have an emotional attachment and an agenda. You're going to want, because you're human, you're going to want something in return, and they can't give anything to you. And you will only hurt them. All right, there's the 3 things. Sorry, I didn't put it on there. That's it for me. I got to go. Thanks for showing up. Again, click the join button if you want to learn how to heal. This 90-day challenge, if you go to thunderwizard.com, that's my other channel. That's daily practice, meditative, yogic energy practice that helps you in the same way find your true sense of self and to take action and create the life of your dreams. You can do that, and I teach you exactly what I do, the actual exercises that I do, and you can follow me as I go through them. You don't have to listen to me talk. You can just hit play and do them with me. So check those things out if you want as well. But the join button for sure, I recommend. If you don't want to join, that's fine. Get yourself a therapist. Go to Coda, meditate on a daily basis, and come back here and share with us your progress so we all benefit. All right, that's it. Got to go. Thanks again for your time. Have a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the States. And let's see, I'm looking for my end screen, which is where I want this. All right, see you guys later.